Well, I want you to know something as we start today. I'm special. I got a letter a couple of weeks ago that said I had won $1,000 a day for the rest of my life. Now, I opened it up, and there was a little asterisk there, and had some little more explaining to that. In fact, I got one this week that I opened up, and it was if you didn't match, you would win what the little matches were. And so I opened it up, and about the third column down, I matched everything, and it said I had won $5,000, and it had a little asterisk, and I didn't have a lot of time that day, but I looked real quickly. I couldn't figure out what the asterisk was, so I put it over by where we put stuff at my house. So I thought I'd look at it later, and lo and behold, I discovered yesterday that my wife had thrown it away. So I don't know about you, but I oftentimes see those things, and there's something that says, I'm going to get it, but then I don't get it. I mean, how many of you ever found out after the fact that you were up for either a new job or a job promotion, but at the time you didn't know anything about it? Anybody else out there with me? Okay, a couple of folks, you find out later, hey, you were considered for this position, but you didn't get the position, but we thought you ought to tell you now, even though then you didn't know that you were up for the position. Life sometimes does that to us. We find out stuff after the fact that if we had known during the fact, we would have done some things differently. And today's story, we're in the third part of our series called Rethinking How We Think About the End. And we've been looking at these ideas based a lot on that song we just heard about, the idea of being well with our soul. And rethinking really what Jesus has been teaching in Matthew chapter 24 and 25. What his real message is there. But today, before we get into the story and before we pray, I want you to know something. The goal of Jesus' story that he tells today, in fact, it's the last story that Matthew records from Jesus. It's not really a parable, but it's sort of a story because he uses an illustration, but he's more importantly about the point. And here's simply the point. You have no idea. And it's an uncomfortable point, but it is the point. But in doing that, Jesus wants us to rethink some things, and today we're going to look at what it means to rethink based on what he tells us here. But before we get into it today, I invite you to bow your heads and let's pray one more time together, okay? Father, at times we wish we understood. For some of us, we're here at this moment because we're trying to figure something out in our lives. For some of us, it's the whole idea about faith and what that means, or what if you're real. For some of us here today, it's about trusting you. For some of us, it's about making sense out of the situation we find ourselves in right at this moment. For some of us, it's rethinking our lives and rethinking our plans. But I would just ask today that both in the uncomfortableness of your words, Jesus, that you would bring us comfort. That we would find that comfort in you. And that somehow you would capture our hearts. Because as much as we wish we could give them to you, we recognize at times that we can only respond to you. And so today I ask you to give us reasons to believe and to respond. And reasons to move closer and closer to you. In your name, amen. If you have a Bible and want to follow along, we're going to be over in Matthew chapter 25. And remember, Jesus has told some stories here. He's gone through a couple of lists, and now this is his final story, he says. In fact, after he gets done with the story, he tells the guys, his disciples, his followers, he says, okay, guys, by the way, you all remember in 2 days the Passover's happening, and by the way, I'm going to get crucified. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go forward. And from then on, that's the focus of the story. The focus of Easter as we celebrate it next weekend. But here's the story Jesus tells when he's talking to them about sort of what it looks like when he comes back, when the end happens and when Jesus returns. And he says these words. The Son of Man will come again in his great glory with all of his angels, and he will sit. He will sit on his great, this glorious throne. And it's this picture of a ruler who is now set, but it's more than just sitting there. He's going to do something. And it says, all the nations of the world will be gathered before him, and he will separate them into two groups, as a shepherd separates sheep from goats. Now, I don't know about you. I've never watched a shepherd separate sheep from goats. I'm not sure what that looks like. I think you can kind of figure out which one's a sheep and a goat, so I'm okay with that part, guys. It's not that part that I'm confused about. I'm just not sure why you have them together and then why you're separating them. I'm sure it meant something a lot to them. These people would have known all about it, but for us, we have no idea. We just know that it's this idea of separation, that the king is on his throne and he's separating sheep and goat, 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 sheep, sheep, over here, over there, over there. And so he says this, and they understand what he means by when he says, because they've seen this happen. You know, here's the goat, here's the sheep, goat, 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 sheep, sheep, sheep. You know, they understand. But we don't realize, but we understand this idea that it's a separation. And Jesus says there's this separation that happens at the end because everybody's sort of together, and so he's got to separate those things. And it says, the Son of Man will put the sheep on his right. So you all get to be sheep today. So everybody say, bah. I love it when you play along. All right. And you guys all get to be, goats. I'm not sure what does goat say? Yeah, you just do those kind of weird sounds because you were on the wrong side, but you just got to play along, all right? So Jesus gets all the sheep on the right side and all the goats on the left side, and that's exactly why you're on the left side, you know? So he gets them all separated, and then he says these words. He says to the people on his right, the sheep, yeah, there we go, come on. My Father has given you his blessing. And here's the cool thing about this word blessing. The Greek word is actually eulogio, which we get our word eulogy. Yeah, see, some Greek here. We get our word eulogy, which means to speak well of, to praise somebody. Nobody gets up at a memorial service or a funeral and hammers on the person, right? It's all these glowing reports. And Jesus says, come, my Father has spoken well about you. Would that be good to know that God had spoken well about you? And your question would probably be, I wonder what he said about me, right? Because I kind of know me. I'm not sure that the Father himself would speak well of me. But Jesus says, he has. He's spoken well. And here's why. Because, or receive the kingdom, God has prepared for you since the world was made, because when I was hungry, and you gave me food. When I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. When I was alone and away from home, that is a stranger, you invited me into your house. You welcomed me. I was without clothes, and I was naked, and you gave me something to wear. I was sick, and you cared for, that is, looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to me. That's what you all did. That's what the Father has spoken well about you. You did all those things, to which the sheep asked this question. Jesus, question? Thank you, yes. When? When did we do that? When did we see you hungry and give you some food? When did we see you thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you, as a stranger and brought you in our house? When did we see you, without clothes and gave you some clothes? When did we know you were in prison and came to visit you? We don't know. Here's the picture. They're clueless to what's happened. The Father's spoken well about them, and they have no idea he's spoken well because they don't know why he's spoken well. And when they're told why, they still go, I don't think I really ever saw you. I mean, when did this happen? But Jesus goes on with the story. Then the king will answer, I tell you the truth. Anything you did for even the least of my people here, you also did for me. It's because what we've done for others, cluelessly, God has looked at us, and God has spoken well about us. And then it says, the king will say to those on his left, this is bad news already, right? Yeah. Those on his left, go away. That is, depart from me. I don't want anything to do with you because you are cursed. And here, cursing is not curse. It means you are cursed, that you are doomed for this. You have no shot. And you question me, well, how come I have no shot, right? That would be their questions. And you go into the eternal fire that was prepared for the devil and his angels. And this is bad news where they end up. He says, listen, because I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat, because I was thirsty and you didn't give me anything to drink. He goes on through this whole list that we heard before, when they didn't give me clothes and didn't welcome me in, didn't visit me in prison, didn't sick, all this kind of stuff. And then he says those people on the left will ask the exact same question. Jesus, I got a question before I leave, just one question. When? When did we see you? When did we see you hungry or thirsty or alone? When did we see you away from home or without clothes or sick or in prison? When did we see these things and not help, that is, care for you? When? And Jesus says, listen, tell you the truth, to the extent you refuse to do it for even the least of my people here, you refuse to do it for me. And these people will go off into eternal punishment. But the good people, that is the righteous, will go to live life forever. That is to eternal life. It's the last story that Jesus tells, according to Matthew, before he says, it's off to Jerusalem to give my life, to have this whole crazy, last few days here, go from a celebration at Passover to my death on Friday, to a no good, very bad, terrible Sabbath day, to a Sunday that literally changes the course and direction of history. And these last words are bothersome words because, if you notice in there, everybody asks the same question, right? Everybody is clueless in this. They say, when? When did this happen? We weren't aware of it. When did this happen? If we had known, we would have done something. So here's some surprises. I want to walk you through some simple surprises today. 3 surprises. The first surprise is this: the surprise of the lost. Because their surprise is, Jesus, if we had known, we would have done something. And since we didn't know, how is it fair to say we're in trouble? I mean, if you just let us know, told us that we should do these things, and said, here you are. They are shocked and surprised because they weren't aware that what they were being valued on, what they were being seen as, what they were being recommended for or recommended against was how they treated other people. And if you know the treating, it's about very basic needs, about very simple needs. Jesus doesn't hold them accountable because they didn't do some miraculous things. Jesus doesn't hold them accountable because they didn't travel to other countries, build stuff, preach stuff, teach stuff. The fact that when somebody was hungry, they didn't do something. When somebody was thirsty, they didn't give them anything to drink. Anybody want something to drink, by the way? Because I don't want to get on the wrong side of this. Anybody? Oh, good. All right. Or to clothe them, or go on and on and on and on. I mean, it's one of the most uncomfortable teachings Jesus does, because it says, they're clueless, and I'm holding you accountable. See, how we respond to the needs around us reveals something important. And the problem in the story is we're not sure what that something important is. Because it is not simply if we'd known, we would have done something. So now that we knew, we're going to do something. Because there's another surprise. There's the surprise of the saved in this story. The ones that are on his right side. The ones that are spoken well of by the Father. See, they didn't do it because they're supposed to do it, but because they did do it. Because they're clueless too. They didn't know in doing this they were doing something for Jesus. They didn't even know in doing this they were doing anything important. Because they can't remember any of these times. See, they would say it's what people like us do. It's what people like us do. And lastly, it's our surprise. Now, part of this rethinking what we think about the end is, you probably have heard at times that churches set up these things like prison ministries. Why do we set up prison ministries? Because Jesus said, I was in prison and you came to visit me. There we go, yeah. Whew. Right? I mean, that's why we set them up, right? Or we set up what we call a community service thing to offer, used clothing to people so that they have clothes, because Jesus said, I was naked, I didn't have any clothes, and you. There we go, right? Or you were hungry, we'll set up a soup kitchen. Because you were hungry so that you got fed, right? And we have heard that the reason we do stuff is so that we qualify this, but I want you to understand, in this story, Jesus' story, nobody knows they're qualified when it gets done. Nobody goes to Jesus, oh, by the way, we did go to prison. We went to prison so that, we do it for you. We set up soup kitchens because we wanted to do it for you. All of these people, every one of them is clueless. And that, to me, that's a surprise. I don't know if it's to you. To me, it's a surprise. Because what do you put your finger on? To figure out if you're on the right or if you're on the left. See, the final judgment is based on our response to Jesus disguised in human need while we're unsure and unclear and unaware that we are responding to Jesus disguised in human need. Because if we were aware that we were responding to Jesus disguised in human need, then we would not be clueless. And Jesus' point is, this is not about doing stuff so that you get in the right side. This is about who you are and who you've become and what life has become like for you. It's about what people like you do, simply because that's what you do. See, our surprise is that Jesus is giving a description here, not a prescription. He's given his observation of what they did, not a description of what they should do, but of what they did do. And that runs so counter to what a lot of us really would appreciate. And that is a list. A list that says, do these things, everything is going to be just all right, right? I can check this off. Saw the guy at the corner that I see every day at the corner, so I gave him a sandwich today. Check. You know, I know the weather's going to turn warm, so I gave him my beanie because I'm not going to need it again. Check. Had some water bottles, even new water bottles, not used ones, but new ones. I gave him a water bottle. Check. And what Jesus seems to be talking about is not some kind of checklist, but the kind of people that these people have become. Because remember, the lost people aren't like, we don't care. The lost people are like, if we had known, we would have done something. And so it isn't just about knowing and doing something, it's about something that just kind of comes out of people. See, what I do matters. But it's not about intentionality. It's not about saying, I'm going to be intentional about doing matters. It is really about who they became. Let me talk to you parents for just a moment. I'm guessing for a lot of you parents, you try to instill good things into your kids, good work ethics. And as much as hard as you try, it is like World War III around your house on a Sunday, getting them to help out. Right? You know, and you think, oh man, I mean, I'm trying hard. My job is to try to raise, good kids so that they have some morals, some skills, some value, that they understand that you pitch in and help out. You don't have to be asked every time to do stuff and asked multiple times to do stuff and bribed to do stuff or threatened to do stuff, and you pour all this stuff into them and you still get frustrated because you're the only one that ends out there mowing the lawn or fixing this or washing this. I want you to know one of the biggest payoffs for a parent is when your kids at other places do the stuff you wish they did at your place, but they've done it at other places. And that's priceless. It's priceless to know that maybe at least they're not doing it. If they're not doing it here, at least they got it someplace, right? At least something clicked finally, and the other place, I'm always shocked. I was shocked, not so much anymore, but early on when my kids, kind of high school, early college, when somebody come and say, oh man, your son, whichever one, or they are so helpful. Thinking, really, my son? Which one are we talking about here? It's like, really, that, he did what? Because as I was at home, it's like, dragging him over here and putting him there, and then, putting his hands on the lawnmower and pushing him, to get him to do stuff. But there is something that's priceless for that when you hear the stories that they've done it. And they did it without any prompting from you. They did it from outside of your presence. They did it unintentionally. But it's who they became. And so for you parents who are trying hard to instill, and it looks like there is no hope, I want you to know there is hope. You just may not see it around your house, But there is no better feeling than to hear those stories that come back and say, what a great, in my case, young man, young woman, maybe in your case, your son or daughter has become who they are. When they act out of just doing it, as opposed to being told to do it, it makes a huge difference. Because it's what people like us do, without aware that that's what people like us do. So let me ask you a question. Do you want to live out the kingdom that is organically, naturally, and spontaneously? Here's the only takeaway I can give you from today. If you want to kind of try to instill this in your life, that is to normalize the important. To normalize the important. Now, I'm not saying you ought to go join a prison ministry, go join a community service, stock your car, your SUV, the whole back of it with granola bars and water and, some scarves and gloves so that you can pass them out. But I am saying that if you want to see this passed down, and if you want to see it developed in your life, then you begin to normalize the important. And according to Jesus, the important thing is us being aware of the people around us and being aware of those needs. And doing something about those needs when we're aware of those needs. And the only way I know to do it is that you begin to normalize it. You parents with younger kids, if that's what you want to do, then figure out ways to make it part of your routine. Don't make it kind of a once-a-year thing. Pastor Jason and I have been talking with Keith Blair, who heads up our summer high school age mission trip that we've gone on every year. Great thing for kids to go to. But our next step that we're committed to doing is getting stuff that happens on a regular basis throughout the rest of the year. So it's not like, woo-woo, we got to go someplace, go work hard for a week or two, come back with great stories, and then we just kind of sit down on our hands waiting for next summer because nothing's going on around here. And we see value in normalizing the important. And if it's important, then we have to get it in their routines. We have to get it in our routines. See, Jesus' story, in my mind, is one of the most unsettling about the end. Because nobody knows. Nobody is aware that what they've done has been that important. The lost, who said, hey, if we'd known, we would have done something. The saved, who said, we didn't know we were doing anything. See, what captures your heart shows up in your life. What captures your heart shows up in your life, and what shows up in your life is what has captured your heart. And I want you to think about something on that. I just want you to look at your life for a moment and think, what is it that has captured your life? And I know the standard answer right away if you were a follower of Jesus, Jesus, because Jesus is the answer for everything. But if I looked at your schedule, your bank account, and maybe more importantly, all the words that you have said this last week, what would those things tell me that has captured your heart? And if you don't like what has captured your heart, then you have to figure out how to change your heart. And I have bad news for you. You can't. I wish it was that easy. I wish it was just simply changing your heart. But I'm convinced that our hearts change as we recognize our need for our hearts to change. And as we recognize that need, that we open ourselves up to what God is trying to change in our lives and hearts. And while we may not be able to change our heart, we can clearly ask God to come in and to change our hearts, to change not just the way we think about things, and even the way we do things, but how we live out those things. Because what captures your heart shows up in your life. And what shows up in your life really has captured your heart.